What is going on? I make a video about Tucker Carlson, and 6 months later, all the media wants to do is talk about Tucker Carlson, and tell me I got it wrong. I make a little documentary about Woody Allen. 6 months later, except I'm not wrong. Stand by the Tucker Carlson video. I stand by the Woody Allen video. I stand by them like I stand by the Bitcoin video I made in 2014. For years, I'm told I'm wrong every time. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And after many years, I'm right. You know what I'm like? I'm like the mice, and he gets a lot wrong. The show uses a set of dishonest facts and ancient clips to string a narrative together to make Tucker Carlson seem like a white nationalist spreading hate to fragile, innocent Americans. Fortunately, I know a lot about Tucker Carlson, and this video is a hack piece. I don't like Tucker Carlson, but I feel compelled to point out the dishonesty of John Oliver's argument in this one. So here is everything wrong with John Oliver's video on Tucker Carlson.
Our main story tonight concerns, I'm sorry to say, Tucker Carlson. You might even be thinking right now, why give him the attention that he's so clearly trolling for? But the fact is, the most watched show on cable. He averages over 3 million views a night.
3 million viewers. Yes, that is a lot for cable news, but that's way less than John Oliver himself gets. James Charles breaks that. Heck, Frenemies is getting more views.
Cash grab.
Who the fuck's gonna pay me to be on OnlyFans?
What John Oliver doesn't disclose is that the Nielsen ratings breaks down where those viewers are. And Tucker Carlson is watched in like 6 states. The majority of his audience comes from Florida, Texas, some places in Las Vegas, Ohio. Most of the country doesn't watch him at all. It's not a diversified, equitable, all across the country people are tuning into Tucker Carlson. It's maybe just people in Florida and some regional areas in Las Vegas.
It's all in America for white supremacist talking points. And I already know what Tucker will say about this because
white nationalism. Let's be literal for a minute. What is that exactly?
Promoting white identity politics as a sleeper cell parasite deep inside cable news. But it's not true, and I'll show you all the ways John Oliver makes his argument in bad faith.
And Tucker, conveniently for him, doesn't fit neatly into a lot of people's perception of white supremacists, especially if they share his definition that it must require burning crosses, Klan hoods, and a name tag that says, "Hello, my name is a racist." You might even have friends who think Tucker can't be racist. I've never heard him say the N-word, as if that is the fucking bar. But for the record, white supremacists themselves seem to be big fans of what Tucker's been doing. Just listen to Derek Black, a former white supremacist whose father started Stormfront.
Okay, so we've switched the rabbit in the hat a little bit. It's a little bit like 3-card Monty here as we're watching this piece of media. Remember, Tucker Carlson is a white nationalist at first, but then John Oliver concedes, well, maybe
can't be racist. I've never heard him say the N-word.
But a lot of white nationalists do support Tucker Carlson. There's some association there. There's some correlation. What do we think about that?
Dangerous. And let's start with some backstory. Tucker grew up in...
We've gone off the rails and onto the dirt road of not being totally honest with the viewer. Tucker Carlson's dad did marry the Swanson heiress with a reasonable fortune. That was Tucker Carlson's dad's second marriage. The Swanson family, not Tucker Carlson's biological mom. His real mom abandoned him and his brother when they were little kids. She pieced out to France boarding school, and he avoids talking about his family dynamic almost at all costs.
I have like terrible eating habits. I went to boarding school at 14. I didn't grow up with...
Mom abandoned him, just like Tucker Carlson's dad was also abandoned at an orphanage. So the concept that he just grew up in a life of privilege and luxury is false.
Now, as a child, Tucker was sent to boarding school where he promptly did 2 things. Fail to impress any number of prestigious universities and start dating the headmaster's daughter, a headmaster who in return arranged to get him into Trinity College.
Again, John Oliver playing a little fast and loose with the truth here. Failed to impress any prestigious universities. Yes, he did not perform well in high school, at the boarding school he was sent to after his mom abandoned him. However, the headmaster's daughter that he started dating is his wife, who he's been married to on many things, but he just dated the headmaster's daughter and that got him into school. It's his wife, he has kids with, their family.
He then became a print journalist, reportedly after his father told him that journalism will take anybody, which, to his dad's credit, did kind of turn out to be true.
This again is quasi-true, but John Oliver is shading it to slant his narrative. Tucker Carlson, when he got out of college, applied to the CIA, a little-known fact. But yeah, he got rejected from the CIA, at which point he wasn't sure what to do. His father had already worked in print media in California, had bopped around, and said, well, Tucker, if you don't know what to do, go into journalism. Journalism doesn't have the credentialism that accountants have or doctors have, where you have to have specialized degrees. Journalism, if you're smart and you're reasonably good at the trade of reporting, you can get a job.
The aftermath of the OJ verdict.
Let me ask you, Mr. Carlson, do you think we're honest with each other race to race?
Oh, no, of course not. I mean, you know, everybody is terrified of one thing. You know, whites are, of course, terrified of being called a racist. Blacks are terrified of being belittled. Of course. I think we need actually probably less conversation about race.
This clip is really old. It shows on the Chiron he was still a writer, a print reporter for the Evening Standard, the Weekly Standard, 1995. He was occasionally doing press hits on C-SPAN at this time. He's in his mid-20s. And John Oliver is going to use this clip from over 26 years ago and berate Tucker Carlson for these terrible opinions. This is a man in his mid-20s. 20 years later, this person said something outrageous in the 90s. Can we believe it? Yeah, we all can believe that people say dumb stuff 25 years ago when they're in their 20s. This is not a good illustration of arguing with somebody in the current day. Get something more current, more modern, more relevant. Then we can have a discussion on what the person actually believes.
First, I'm pretty sure that black people are less terrified of being belittled than of being killed, jailed, economically exploited, or indeed denied access to healthcare after their heads literally explode from hearing someone in a bow tie and plaid blazer suggest being called racist is as bad as actually experiencing racism. Now, from there, Tucker bounced around.
CNN, MSNBC, and PBS. Little known, but I know it. Tucker Carlson had a show on PBS. It's true. I don't know if John Oliver's team caught it, but that's how much research I did. And while I was at MSNBC, was the one that hired Rachel Maddow. Something to think about when we're going back to how Tucker Carlson is a white nationalist.
At CNN, he did manage to produce, and I don't say this lightly, the most 2003 clip of all time.
You work with Pepsi for a long time. Candidly, just between you and me, how much Pepsi do you think you drink on an average day?
I really do like Pepsi.
Really? What's your favorite kind?
I really do. My favorite kind of Pepsi? Pepsi's Pepsi.
Well, you don't drink Diet Pepsi or
no,
Pepsi
just regular Pepsi.
Look, I cannot stress this enough. Leave Britney alone. Don't do gotcha journalism about her Pepsi consumption.
It's not gotcha journalism. If anything, Tucker Carlson doesn't want to be interviewing Britney Spears, and if he's forced to interview Britney Spears, he does not want to be asking about corporate brand sponsorships and what kind of Pepsi Britney Spears is drinking. This is 2003. Again, Tucker Carlson is early on in his television career. He's at CNN here, which is his first television contract gig. He's interviewing a high-profile celebrity. He has producers in his ear that are often telling him the questions to read. It's not really fair to take a clip from near 20 years ago and use it as a modern-day Tucker Carlson. Why is he asking about Pepsi? Because Britney Spears has a sponsorship with Pepsi in 2003. Britney's PR wants to talk about Pepsi, and Tucker Carlson's producers are telling him to ask Britney Spears. The team knows this because John Oliver has a team of producers and writers that help shape Fox.
And while Tucker eventually failed upwards into a primetime Fox show in 2016, the fascinating thing is, if you go back and watch his earlier clips, you can see him learning the tricks of his trade right in front of you. Watch him talk about Pat Buchanan, the Republican firebrand and noted anti-immigrant crusader, and break down one of Buchanan's go-to moves with the precision of a dedicated student.
I mean, Pat does raise issues that I think are important. Unfortunately, Pat Buchanan raises them in a way that I think is discredited, and when attacked, he can always fall back on the line, well, the tiny cabal that controls American politics doesn't like me because I speak truth to power. This is actually, incidentally, almost verbatim what he said the other day, that I offend the Karen Silkwood of politics, someone who's so truthful that he's being hunted down by the conspiracy that runs Washington. I mean, it's all a bit much.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that clip was a bit much. That was a long clip to play on air. Yes, Tucker Carlson is an astute observer of other people on television. It's the reason why he's so successful. He observes what people do around him. He learns what they do, and then he chooses whether to copy it or not. He also, oddly enough, was able to observe Bill O'Reilly's shtick and call Bill O'Reilly's downfall 15 years before it happened.
Bill O'Reilly's success is built on the perception that he really is who he claims to be. If he ever gets caught out of character, it's
the moment that it's revealed not to be true, it's over. The moment he gets caught, you know, slapping a flight attendant on the Concorde for not bringing his champagne fast enough, or barking at, you know, one of his subordinates. The second that makes Page Six, it's over, right? Because the whole thing is predicated on the fact that he is who he says he is, and just nobody is that person.
Tucker Carlson is a very good observer.
Because the tiny cabal that controls American politics doesn't like me because I speak truth to power is now Tucker's signature move. He does it all the time, whenever he's criticised. A few years ago, he lost advertisers after saying, and I quote, that immigrants make our country poorer and dirtier and more divided. And this is how he fired back.
Those who won't shut up get silenced. You've seen it a million times. It happens all the time. The enforcers scream, "Racist!" on Twitter until everybody gets intimidated. It's a tactic, a well-worn one. Nobody thinks it's real. And it won't work with this show. We're not intimidated. We plan to try to say what's true until the last day. And the truth is, unregulated mass immigration has badly hurt this country's natural landscape.
Oh, fuck.
John Oliver and I walk away from this clip with different understandings. John Oliver sees what Tucker Carlson is saying and sees Tucker Carlson shifting to cancel Tucker Carlson. But I view it a little bit differently, because my understanding of Tucker Carlson is he's been fired a lot. His shows have been canceled a lot.
You know, if you haven't been fired because your boss has decided that you're not making enough money for the company, you know, get back to me after that's happened. They sometimes fired me, as I said, but they were nice to me even then.
7:30 that night, I meet him in this bar. I walk in. As he's gripping my hand to greet me, he says, "I've got some bad news. We're canceling your show."
He's had to work actually quite hard to keep him what he thinks, regardless if he'll get the show canceled and he'll lose his job. He's lost his job many times. CNN, MSNBC, PBS. Things come and go. He has resigned to that fact, and he's simply stating he doesn't really care. He will try to tell us what he feels for as long as he can. That's how I interpret the statement.
And it won't work with this show. We're not intimidated. We plan to try to say what's true until the last day.
John Oliver and I have different perceptions of what Tucker Carlson is implicitly saying there.
But that technique gets to the absolute heart of Tucker's show. So often, he positions himself as someone just asking the hard questions, the ones that they don't want you asking. Questions like, is affirmative action racist? And should America be selective with immigrants? And has the Democratic Party become anti-white and anti-male? Just asking questions while heavily implying that the answer to those questions is yes.
Yeah, that's certainly true. That's a really common technique, and Fox News does it really well to pander to its audience. It asks selective questions with the inherent answer being yes, and allows for a confirmation bias, and why Tucker Carlson's show is popular. But again, that's not particularly Tucker Carlson. This is a pattern throughout Fox News. It was a pattern with his predecessor, Bill O'Reilly. And again, we must remember, as John Oliver is well aware, that Tucker Carlson is simply the front for a large system. There are producers, there are writers. It's the machine taking that approach, not per se Tucker Carlson.
And the most telling thing about Tucker's framing of himself as the scourge of the elites and the hero of the common man is that for Tucker, who constitutes the common man is very selective. Take Ilhan Omar. Just watch him lose his shit over a clip that he's about to play of something she said.
If anyone should love America, it's Ilhan Omar. This country rescued her from a squalid Kenyan refugee camp and made her a national figure, quite an ascent. But Ilhan Omar is not grateful. She hates us for it. Watch Omar tell us it is time to dismantle.
All right, Tucker Carlson just did what John Oliver did there, which is he's going to preemptively characterize what a subject's saying. In this case, he's preemptively characterizing Congressmember Ilhan Omar's statements by saying she hates us for it. Well, let's see what she actually said.
Who is being shut out? We will perpetuate this inequality. So we cannot stop at criminal justice system. We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it.
Dismantle the American economy and the...
No, she did not say dismantle the American economy. I think it's totally fair to call Tucker Carlson out on this one. Ilhan Omar says something about dismantling systems of oppression like the criminal justice system, which I think is a fair point there. And Tucker Carlson goes back to dismantling the entire economic model. No, 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 Tucker, calm down. Told you, I don't like Tucker Carlson. But let's get back to John Oliver.
According to Tucker, dismantling the system of oppression means dismantling the entire American economy and system of government, especially not when this is what he said next.
The problem is there are many of us here who do like this country. We live here. We don't want to destroy it. We have every right to fight to preserve our nation and our heritage and our culture.
Wow. Preserve our heritage and culture. That is direct. In fact, his pre-written caption there, "We have to fight to preserve our nation and heritage," drew a lot of comparisons to the 14 words, the famous white supremacist slogan that says, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children."
I mean, yeah, they prime our mind to look for it, but we must secure the existence. I mean, we have to fight to preserve our nation and heritage was, I'm sure, written by some producer or writer, not even Tucker Carlson himself. So attributing that statement to Tucker Carlson, tenuous at best. I don't see the connection, John Oliver. Just being honest.
And if you think, well, come on, that seems like a bit of a stretch. You can't know what Tucker means by our heritage and culture. You should know that he hasn't always been that disciplined about his messaging. In the late 2000s, he used to call into a radio show hosted by shock jock Bubba the Love Sponge. And in those calls, the thin veil covering his racism would occasionally get thrown off in moments like this.
Iraq is a crappy place filled with a bunch of, semi-literate primitive monkeys.
But I just have zero sympathy for them or their culture, a culture where people just don't use toilet paper or forks.
Okay, that isn't...
Okay, let me shade this a little bit, not offering a defense of what Tucker Carlson said. It was poorly worded. Feels kind of racist, if not very culturally insensitive, but Tucker Carlson had been to Iraq. He went there and did writer. Tucker Carlson is a very good writer and vastly different than how we perceive him on TV. You would be shocked if you read a piece by Tucker Carlson. Nonetheless, Tucker Carlson went to Iraq. He stayed in Iraq. He did some reporting in Iraq. I guess this was his perception of Iraq in 2006. Again, this is a quote from 15 years ago. Perhaps Tucker Carlson's statements have evolved as he's taken on more responsibility in life and not trying to be quasi-entertaining on a radio show in between getting canceled for various TV shows. We never know quite what motivates people to say things sometimes, particularly long in the distant past. And when we dislike someone, we infer negative intent on ambiguous situations. Given this was an out-of-context clip from 15 years ago on a radio show, is it Tucker Carlson being maybe racist and anti-Iraqi and culturally insensitive? Or is it him saying flippant statements after being there for 6 months and trying to be entertaining on a radio show? I don't know.
The point is, when you know how Tucker speaks when he speaks freely, the filter through which he processes the world for his audience becomes painfully apparent, because he is smart enough not to openly say into a camera that certain races are more deserving of scorn or less worthy of respect. He will just heavily imply that depending on who he's talking about.
This is where John Oliver makes a really interesting point that I agree with. Tucker Carlson is smart. He's way in all kinds of odd historical backgrounds. Tucker Carlson's quite smart, and he'll never outright say anything that'll totally catch him in a bind. So it is entirely possible that he does have dark, seedy views on other humans, and he's never going to outright explicitly say them. He's only going to imply them heavily, as John Oliver alleges. But that makes me think deeply that Tucker Carlson really cares about the cultural issues John Oliver is imputing on him.
Take the Capitol riots. Tucker said that he deplored the violence, but repeatedly compelled his viewers to try and understand where the demonstrators were coming from.
On January 6th, we had a riot at the U.S. Capitol. Why did that happen? It happened because millions of...
No, Tucker Carlson did call it a riot.
American voters were convinced that the last election was not fair. Where did they get that? As if they're animals who take commands and do what they're told, but they're not animals. They're people, they're American citizens who can see what's happening and come to their own conclusions about it. They saw the radical increase in mail-in voting, millions did, and it corroded their faith and the public's faith in our systems of election.
Okay, hold on.
Hold on. What Tucker Carlson is saying here is nuanced, and I don't have a problem with what Tucker Carlson inherently is saying. He's saying, imagine people complexly, and that's something I believe deeply in, even people you disagree with. And Tucker Carlson is arguing that however we may feel about the people that stormed the Capitol or proclaim that there was massive election fraud, there are people, often smart, dumb, zombies listening to Trump. I may disagree with those people, but Tucker Carlson's message is fine.
And that plea for understanding there is especially hard to take when you contrast it with how he reacted to last summer's Black Lives Matter protests.
People like this don't bother to work. They don't volunteer or pay taxes to help other people. They live for themselves. They do exactly what they feel like doing. They say exactly what they feel like saying. They spray paint their opinions on buildings. On television, hour by hour, we watch these people, criminal mobs, destroy...
Right, so I think what John Oliver is going to say here is that look at the dichotomy and difference. When it's white people storming the Capitol, Tucker Carlson tells us all to imagine people complexly. But look at Tucker Carlson during the summer, when it was the BML protests, he labels them all these derogatory adjectives. He reduces them down to stereotypes. He's not imagining the BLM protests complexly at all. It's hypocritical and convenient that it's easy to simplify and distill the BML protests down to meaningless drivel, and they happen to be black, and the Capitol protest riots happen to be white. What can we infer from that? But really, both arguments can be made for both situations. Some cable news channels chose to take the Capitol riots and reduce them down to simplistic drivel, calling them thugs and goons and not imagining the Capitol riots complexly. Conversely, some cable news took the BML protests and riots and imagined them complexly. Said, what are the issues and challenges these people are facing? What is causing them to rise up, take to the streets, act aggressively, protest? Imagine them complexly.
Well, that's quite a different tone. And it is interesting to see who gets to be American citizens who came to their own conclusions and who gets to be criminal mobs who destroy what the rest of us have built. And it does seem like the dividing...
Right, this is a good point and wrong, but I think it's a point that can be applied broadly to all cable news. CNN is equally guilty of doing the exact same thing, but inverted. Always inverted. If there is a rule between cable news, invert. Always invert. Imagine Fox News is going to take one stance and CNN is going to take the exact opposite stance. So is it a sin that Tucker Carlson and Fox News is committing? Or a sin that all cable news commits, but they commit it in different ways, which is to reduce, imagine complexly, the concepts and people they do agree with, rather than inform us all that it's best to imagine everyone complexly, regardless if we agree with them or not. Which I would argue is what I'm trying to do with this video, is that, from my understanding and research of Tucker Carlson, I don't like him, but he is a complex individual, and it benefits us all to imagine Tucker Carlson complexly.
Clear takeaway is that white people should be terrified at the idea of any situation. Just asking questions, remember? Like,
I would agree that's a very common theme that Tucker Carlson hammers on about his show, that power is being taken away from us, the viewer, if we're a Fox News viewer, and that we should resist it. But another common theme of power takers on Tucker Carlson's show is the Silicon Valley elite. And the Silicon Valley elite, white, rich white people. So if we want to make the argument, always an identity based on race, but often for Tucker Carlson's show, a fault line divides the working class majority.
Remnants of its opponent, in this case, Western civilization. Is the culture into which they're coming, the Western civilization we're talking about, superior to the culture that these immigrants are bringing? Do you think it's possible to move a large Muslim population into the West and successfully integrate them into Western culture? Have you seen that anywhere?
Yeah. For Tucker, it seems Western...
The last clip John Oliver showed, it was Tucker Carlson asking a question, not making a statement, and they didn't show whom Tucker Carlson was asking that question to, because that provides the context for the entire question. Was it Obama? Was it... each would provide context for why the question is being asked.
It seems Western civilization is somehow both the mighty and essential bedrock upon which all modern human existence is built, and also a delicate house of cards that will collapse if you so much as look at it wrong. And again, he will be careful not to verbally link race and civilization like he's calling into a Love Sponges radio show in 2006, but he will occasionally dance incredibly close to it.
Let me just stipulate, I'm for getting along, I'm for colorblindness, I'm for you to say, what is this? And maybe I don't want to live in a country that looks nothing like the country I grew up in. Is that bigoted?
Yeah.
No. I understand a context in which it can be bigoted, but not necessarily. That is the same statement that applies to American immigration. Many people saw their country change radically for the worse, whether that's Venezuela or why you had Italians immigrate to the United States. They each grew up in countries where they saw the system of government or the environment radically change. They did not like it.
David Duke. Last year, when endorsing Trump for president, Duke even suggested that Tucker Carlson should be his VP, explaining Tucker's value to the white supremacist cause like this.
He doesn't use the word white very often, but that's the underlying message that he's showing, and he shows that there is massive racism in America against white people, while at the same time saying there's no systematic racism. But people get the message.
Yeah.
When we allow guilt through association, we make an implicit connection between often things that are very ambiguous and broad. David Duke, in his radio broadcast, I am confident, although I've never listened to it, probably derives a lot of his opinions from the Bible, from the religious texts. And although the Bible doesn't use the word white a lot, I'm sure David Duke finds a lot of justification for his beliefs. But does that make the Bible inherently white nationalist? I don't know. The Bible is broad, it's ambiguous. It's a Rorschach test. It allows us to draw what we want to draw from it, and then use it to project our opinions as we please. Tucker Carlson's show is a bit like that, as is all media that appeals to Duke or anybody can take from it, derive the meaning they want to derive, and then say, look, the Bible stands by my beliefs, Tucker Carlson stands by my beliefs, CNN stands by my beliefs, the Quran stands by my beliefs. But that's the problem with association and not direct evidence.
And while it's bad enough to hear that white supremacist families gather around to watch Tucker twice, the fact isn't enough.
So John Oliver has all of the nuance of a Calvinist preacher when it comes to talking about Tucker Carlson. Zero. So he could only find a few clips ranging from 25 to 15 years ago to imply Tucker is a racist, and he then presents a bunch of people who are racist, who like Tucker's show, but fails to point out any tangible connection between Tucker's real-life beliefs and actions and the fringe groups that happen to watch and like him. Those fringe ethno-state and white nationalists. They hear things in Fox News that appeal to their beliefs. That's a fact. And Fox News, as a channel, has a pattern of framing stories with an undercurrent of racism. That is troublesome. But from my observation, it has been a pattern at Fox News in white nationalist beliefs or white anything. Tucker is an annoying talking head that says controversial things, and when called out, retreats back to his defense that the elites are trying to silence him. Annoying, but not white nationalist. And as I'm New York Times reporter Taylor Lorenz, I know in the media industry, what Taylor does is comparative, and I'm speaking directly to other journalists, and when challenged, always retreats to the tired defense of, I am being harassed by the misogynistic patriarchy because I'm a female. Times reporters use that excuse, but I'm not willing to say her beliefs are anti-male or she operates entirely from a place of radical feminist propaganda. She's just a person making lame excuses and provocative content like Tucker Carlson. Is her body of work ugly and opportunistic? Yes, but I can't infer her misandrous beliefs just because I don't like her opinions or her tactics in the media industry. So there we go. I even have a theory for why John Oliver is. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you would like to see more content like this, please support me on Patreon.